I paid my parents' bills for years until they called me a waste of space at my sister's graduation. Now they're living in their car while I own their house. The moment is seared into my brain, standing in the reception hall after Emily's college. Graduation. Watching my parents beam with pride as they introduced their real achiever to everyone. My father's arm was draped around Emily's shoulders while my mother dabbed at fake tears, clutching her Kate Spade purse that I had bought her for Christmas. "This is our daughter who actually makes us proud," my dad announced to his golf buddy, champagne glass wobbling in his hand. "Unlike her sister who's just wasting her potential on a corporate job, taking up space and collecting paychecks." My mother laughed, that high-pitched society laugh she practices in the mirror. "Oh, Richard, don't be so harsh. Not everyone can be special." I stood 3 feet away holding the $200 cake I'd ordered for the occasion, paralyzed as the words hung in the air. The worst part? They knew I was there. They just didn't care. Emily, draped in her graduation gown with honors cords I had paid for, had the decency to look uncomfortable at least. But she didn't say anything. She never did. I smiled tightly, set the cake down on the nearest table, and walked out, past the decorations I'd funded, past the open bar I'd arranged, past the photographer I'd hired. I got into my Audi, the only thing I'd ever splurged on for myself, and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine as they celebrated the golden child's achievement, was that I'd just received some interesting paperwork from their mortgage company. Paperwork that would change everything. Updated. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thanks for all the support and comments. To those asking if I moved out immediately, no, I played the long game. I've read every message and will try to respond when I can. Also, is it wrong that part of me still feels guilty about what happened? Next, their favoritism wasn't new. It had been the background radiation of my childhood. Emily, 4 years younger, was the miracle baby born after medical complications, the daughter with the artistic talent and charming personality. I was the practical one, the responsible one, the one who would be fine. When we were kids, my dance recitals were optional family events, but Emily's stick figure art shows were mandatory attendance with flowers and dinner after. When I graduated with honors from Northwestern with a finance degree, my parents came but left early, claiming traffic concerns. When Emily got accepted to NYU for art history, they threw a party and invited everyone they knew. The real shift happened 5 years ago. My father's construction business hit financial trouble after the housing market crashed. My mother's interior design clients dried up. They were underwater on the mortgage for the 5-bedroom suburban Chicago house I grew up in, the one with the custom kitchen and sunroom addition that were essential investments, according to my mother. They called me crying, terrified of losing the family home. I had just landed my job at Deloitte and was finally making decent money after years of student loans and ramen dinners. "Just until we get back on our feet," they promised. "We don't want to ask, but Emily's still in school, and we have nowhere else to go." So I started paying. First the mortgage, $2,850 a month for a house I didn't live in. Then the utilities when they just needed a little help this month. Then Emily's tuition payments when they fell behind. I even set up automatic transfers for their property, taxes, and insurance. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with IKEA furniture while funneling over $4,000 a month to keep them afloat. I skipped vacations, worked overtime, and built my career with single-minded focus. Dating became an afterthought. Who had the time or energy? My friends gradually stopped inviting me out because I was always working or too broke to join them. Through it all, my parents acted like I was simply fulfilling an obligation. Thank yous became rare, then non-existent. When I'd visit, my mother would point out things that needed upgrading. My father would comment on my boring job while explaining how his business was just temporarily struggling. 5 years of temporary. Emily, meanwhile, graduated and bounced between art gallery internships that paid nothing, living at home rent-free, driving the Lexus they leased for her, that yes, somehow became part of my monthly contribution. She traveled to Paris and Barcelona for career development, trips that mysteriously appeared on the credit card I had foolishly added them to as authorized users for emergencies only. The worst part? I kept telling myself this was normal, that families help each other, that one day they'd recognize my sacrifice. Then came last Christmas, 6 months before Emily's master's graduation. We were sitting around their living room, new furniture courtesy of my year-end bonus, when my father casually mentioned their estate planning. "We want to make sure everything's properly arranged for you girls," he said, swirling his scotch. "Macallan 18, another gift from me. Of course, Emily will get the house since she plans to stay in Chicago, and you're so established in your career in the city. You understand." I nodded automatically, the good daughter. It was only later, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, unchanged since high school, unlike Emily's room which had been redecorated 3 times, that his words fully registered. The house I was paying for, had been paying for years, wasn't even going to be partly mine. But I said nothing. I wrote the checks. I made the transfers. I listened to my mother's complaints about property taxes and my father's plans for a hot tub they couldn't afford until the day of Emily's graduation. Until waste of space. Until I finally opened the certified letter from Midwest Mortgage Company that had arrived that morning, the one I'd tossed in my purse to read later. The letter was addressed to me, which was odd since the mortgage statements usually went to my parents' address even though the payments came from my account. I opened it sitting in my car outside the reception hall, hands still shaking from my parents' casual cruelty. Dear Ms. Harmon, it began. Thank you for your request regarding the property at 1452 Willow Creek Drive. As per your inquiry, we can confirm that as of March 15th, the deed to the property was transferred from Richard and Catherine Harmon to Emily Harmon as sole owner. I read it 3 times, my brain refusing to process the words. They hadn't just promised Emily the house in some distant future inheritance scenario. They had already legally given it to her. The house I was paying for. The house that wasn't even in their names anymore. 5 years. Over $240,000 in mortgage payments alone. And they had transferred the deed without telling me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Where did you go? Emily wants to cut the cake. I turned off my phone, started my car, and drove to the one person who would understand. My best friend Mia, a real estate attorney I'd met at a charity function 3 years ago. I showed up at her door unannounced, holding the letter like it was radioactive. They did what? Mia's voice echoed through her apartment after I explained the situation. She grabbed her laptop and started typing furiously. This is fraud, straight up. If you've been making all the payments, there's a clear paper trail. How long has this been going on? 5 years, I whispered, the number suddenly seeming impossible. But the deed transfer was just a couple months ago. Mia's eyes narrowed. Right before her graduation. Interesting timing, like they were making sure everything was locked down before you might discover it. She clicked through some legal database. Do you have documentation of all your payments? I nodded. Being a financial analyst had its advantages. I documented everything. Then you have options, Mia said, something fierce in her expression. You could claim constructive trust. Essentially, you've been paying the mortgage with the understanding that you had an interest in the property. This deed transfer could be considered fraudulent concealment. For the first time in hours, something other than shock coursed through me. Something that felt dangerously like power. What's the first step? I asked. Mia's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. First, you stop paying. Immediately. Cancel every automatic payment, every transfer. Then we document everything and find you the best real estate attorney in Chicago who isn't me, because I want to be able to testify for you if needed. That night, I went through 5 years of bank statements, credit card bills, Venmo transfers, and text messages. I created spreadsheets, tracking every dollar I'd given them. I found emails where I'd specifically mentioned paying my share of the house, and their responses acknowledging my help with the mortgage. I dug up the Christmas card where my father had written, "Thanks for keeping a roof over our heads." By morning, I had documentation of $347,892.46. I'd paid toward their house, expenses, and Emily's education. I had evidence that they'd regularly discussed my financial contributions while deliberately keeping me in the dark about the deed transfer. Consulted with the attorney Mia recommended, filed an emergency injunction to prevent any further property transfers, and sent one final text to my family group chat. Due to recent discoveries regarding the house at Willow Creek, I've been advised to cease all financial support effective. Immediately, please direct any questions to my attorney. I included his contact information and blocked their numbers before they could respond. Then I waited. It took exactly 17 hours before the tsunami hit. Updated. The comments section is wild. To clarify, yes, I had documentation of everything. And no, they didn't have access to any of my accounts after I locked them out. Some of you asked if they tried to spin the story to family members. Oh, they tried. But evidence doesn't lie, and I had receipts for days. Do you think I was too methodical in how I handled everything? The first wave came via email. My mother, alternating between rage and tearful manipulation. How could you do this to your family? And, we've always supported you, and, if you're having some kind of breakdown, we can get you help. My father's emails were shorter, more threatening. You'll regret this, and no daughter of mine, and you better fix this immediately. Emily's approach was different. A long, rambling message about how she had no idea about the deed transfer, a lie, and how she was caught in the middle, another lie, and how she'd always looked up to me, the biggest lie of all. She ended with what she clearly thought was her trump card. Mom and Dad were just trying to protect the house because of your lifestyle. My lifestyle. My boring, workaholic, IKEA-furnished lifestyle that had kept them in luxury for 5 years. Didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I let my attorney handle all communication and focused on building my case. The paper trail was damning. Not only had I made every mortgage payment, but I had texts and emails proving they knew exactly what they were doing. 3 weeks after I cut them off, the consequences of 5 years of financial dependency hit them. Like a freight train, their credit cards were declined, utility bills went unpaid. The lease company repossessed Emily's Lexus. My father's business, which had been on life support for years, finally flatlined. I heard through mutual friends that they were telling everyone I had abandoned them, that I was having a psychotic episode, that they were worried about my mental health. Some people believed them. Most asked questions they couldn't answer, like why they had transferred the deed to Emily or where they thought the mortgage payments had been coming from, for 5 years. The court date was set for July 15th, 6 weeks after Emily's graduation. In the meantime, my parents missed their first mortgage payment in 5 years, then their second. Foreclosure notices were sent to Emily as the property owner of record. She panicked and tried to sell the house quickly, not understanding that my legal claim had created a title issue that made it unsellable. My phone rang constantly with numbers I didn't recognize, my parents and Emily using friends' phones to try to reach me. I changed my number. They showed up at my apartment, but building security had been warned and didn't let them up. They tried to contact me through work, but my assistant had strict instructions to block their calls and emails. I was a ghost, too. Them, just as they had wanted. Except now they desperately needed the waste of space they had dismissed. The day before our court date, I received a letter from my mother. Unlike her previous attempts to contact me, this one was honest, raw, and terrified. "We never thought you would actually stop helping us. The power has been shut off. Dad's blood pressure medication is running low, and we can't afford the refill. Emily had to drop out of her PhD program because the tuition payment bounced. We're sleeping in the car because the house is too hot without air conditioning. Please, if you ever loved us, help us one more time." I brought the letter to court the next day. I sat across from my family, my father unshaven and haggard, my mother with dark circles under her eyes, Emily pale and silent, and felt nothing but calm resolve. My attorney presented our case: 5 years of payments, proof that I had been deceived about the deed transfer, evidence that they had deliberately hidden their actions while continuing to accept my money. Their attorney tried to argue that my payments were gifts, but fell apart when presented with the text messages and emails explicitly discussing my contribution to our house. The judge took exactly 27 minutes to reach her decision. The deed transfer was deemed fraudulent. Based on the amount I had paid toward the mortgage and the current equity in the house, I was awarded full ownership. My parents and Emily were given 30 days to vacate. As we left the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. "Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. "I don't know, Mom. I'm just a waste of space, remember? Figure it out." My father started to say something, but Emily pulled him away, whispering furiously. I walked out of the courthouse alone, got into my Audi, and drove to my apartment. That night, I slept better than I had in 5 years. The next morning, I contacted a property management company and listed the house for rent at market rate, $3,200 per month plus utilities. Then I waited. It took exactly 2 weeks before Emily called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost declined it, but something made me answer. "The eviction notice came," she said without preamble. "Mom and Dad have nowhere to go. They've been staying in Dad's office, but the business is being liquidated next week. No one will rent to them with their credit, and I can't afford anything on my gallery salary." She paused. "We need help." "That sounds difficult," I replied, using the same tone my mother had used when I'd complained about working 80-hour weeks to support them. Can we rent the house from you?" The words seemed physically painful for her to say. "The rental listing is public," I said. "You can apply like anyone else. First month, last month, security deposit required. Credit check and income. Verification standard. No exceptions." "We don't have that kind of money," she whispered, "and our credit is destroyed." "That sounds difficult," I repeated. Emily was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "We're family," she finally said, voice breaking. "Doesn't that mean anything to you?" I thought about Christmas mornings where Emily's pile of gifts dwarfed mine, about dance recitals with empty seats where my parents should have been, about working through pneumonia because taking time off meant they might miss a mortgage payment, about waste of space. "Family means everything to me," I said. "That's why I paid your mortgage, your tuition, your car, and your European vacations for 5 years. But I've recently learned an important lesson about family from experts. Would you like to know what it is?" She didn't answer, but I continued. "Anyway, Family is conditional, help is temporary, and space is only valuable when the right person occupies it. 3 months later, I own a house I never wanted, and a family I barely recognize. My parents and Emily eventually found a 3-bedroom apartment they could afford by pooling their resources, meaning Emily finally had to get a real job, and my parents had to downsize their expectations dramatically. The house at Willow Creek Drive now generates rental income that goes into my retirement account. I hired a management company to handle everything, so I never have to set foot in it again if I don't want to. Sometimes I drive by just to remind myself it's real. My parents still attempt contact occasionally, increasingly desperate messages about reconciliation and forgiveness. Emily sent a birthday card last month with a carefully neutral message about healing and moving forward. I put it in my documentation file without responding. Some family members think I went too far. My aunt called me vindictive at a recent wedding we both attended. My cousin, however, pulled me aside at the same event and whispered, "About time someone stood up to them." The most surprising outcome wasn't the house or the money, or even the freedom from financial obligation. It was discovering who I am without the weight of their expectations and manipulations. I started dating again. I took a cooking class. I booked a solo trip to Portugal that I'd been putting off for years. Last week, I received a package at my office. Inside was a small flat jewelry box and a note in my mother's handwriting. "This was your grandmother's. It should have gone to you years ago." The box contained my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one my mother had always promised would be mine, then suddenly couldn't find when I graduated college. The one that mysteriously appeared on Emily's finger at family events until recently. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. Not because I missed them or regretted my actions, but because I finally understood the transactional nature of their love. Even now, they were trying to buy their way back into my life with something that should have been freely given out of love. I put the ring in my safe deposit box and sent a brief email to my mother. Package received. Please direct all future communication through my attorney. Yesterday, I passed a woman on the street who looked so much like my mother that I did a double take. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the ingrained response to caretake, to fix, to make everything okay for everyone but myself. Then I remembered the reception hall, the champagne glass, waste of space. I kept walking. People ask if I miss them. The truth is complicated. I miss the family I thought I had, the parents I deserved, the sister who might have been my friend. I don't miss who they actually were. Sometimes I wonder if I'm too harsh, if I should offer them some kind of relationship with boundaries and distance. Then I remember how quickly they transferred the deed when they thought I wouldn't notice. How easily they dismissed my existence while cashing my checks. How thoroughly they believed their own narrative despite all evidence to the contrary. So I keep my distance. I focus on building the life I deferred for 5 years. And I sleep soundly in my apartment, knowing that the house I pay for is finally, legally mine. Updated. 6 months later, and I'm still getting messages from distant relatives telling me I should forgive and forget. But I've learned that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. Some of you asked for an update on my parents' situation. They're still struggling, but surviving. Do I regret standing up for myself after years of being used? Not for a single second. Would you have done the same?